After the interruption of our regular schedule last week due to some internal communication needs following another updated guideline regarding masks from the CDC. If you find yourself challenged by changes in life, this is a challenging time, is it not? But knowing that to be the case for many of us today, I want to reach back to where we left off last week and pick up again in Hebrews chapter 3. In verse 12, we found this warning. See to it, brothers, that none of you has a sinful, unbelieving heart that turns away from the living God. Now, the context of that warning was the danger of sin's deceitfulness and the hardening of our hearts that could potentially cause us to let go of our faith and trust in Jesus and lose the experience of our partnership, the promise of our partnership with Christ. But that spawns a bigger question, right? What are we really risking? What could we possibly lose? What does this partnership really look like? Well, that's a great question. And let me admit right up front that answering it definitively is challenging at best. But before we give up altogether, let's go on and look at what our author writes a few verses later in chapter 4. He writes these words, Therefore, since the promise of entering his rest still stands, let us be careful that none of you be found to have fallen short of it. Let us therefore make every effort to enter that rest so that no one will fall by following their example of disobedience. Now, there's an interesting little irony here that I don't want you to miss. You see it? There's a promise of rest that still stands, the author writes, but then he commands that we're to make every effort to enter into it. Now, is it promise or reward? Well, let's consider what we're being told here for a moment first. First of all, I think we have to ask this question, what is the promise of his rest? Now, in the context of this writing, I think there's a reference to a couple pictures. First of all, he describes rest as the seventh day of creation where God is said to have rested from all that he did. Not because he was tired, but because it was good. Sabbath is a word that means to cease. And in the case of God, it refers to that point that he stopped creating and simply enjoyed all that he had made as it was very, very good. Now that was pictured as a regular observance in the law that was given to his people as a time to stop laboring and enjoy the goodness of relationships and the provisions of God, the rich provisions that he had given them to enjoy. It was a time of celebration and enjoyment of the goodness of life the way God intended, of rich family relationships and good times of celebration and satisfaction. But there is also a reference in that same text to entering the promised land under Joshua, the land that was promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the realization of a promise given to a people by God. The land was a place where labor yielded great harvests, where security would be no concern, and life would be full and flourishing because God dwelled among his people. Now, in both ways, these pictures point us to life that can be experienced now as a result of the deliverance of Jesus Christ, the forgiveness of sin that he provides in the indwelling and empowerment of the Holy Spirit in our lives. But it also points us as well to the renewal of all things when Jesus returns. Now here's the tension. We're told that that is a promise, but we're commanded to make every effort to enter into that. Now, while I don't have time here to discuss today how to do that, let me point out why I think it's important that we consider it. You see, it's God's desire for us to taste and see the fullness of life, literally what heaven's going to be like even now. So we can be not only fully prepared for when it breaks in upon us, but we can point others to it with confidence and hope. And that's important. We're living in a world where simple mask guidelines can usher in national confusion and chaos, where oftentimes a job or work produces dissatisfaction and disdain rather than joy and fulfillment as it intended, where disease and viruses can be met with fear, inordinate fear of death and separation. In the midst of all of that, the Lord invites us into his rest, into an experience of life the way he intends and promises in the future. And it's life we potentially miss if we are unwilling to make the effort to enter in. And that, my friends, starts by encouraging one another to do so. So allow me to remind you as we say goodbye for now that the Lord loves you. The Lord is in this place. The Lord is here now, today, and his rest is available to us if we will make the effort to enter in. See to it that we're not hardened by sin's deceitfulness. And while it is today, love and trust him. I look forward to seeing you next time, my friends. I love you all. And until then, enter into that rest.